Hello and welcome to the Juggling podcast. My name is Luke Burridge and this is the podcast where we talk about juggling. I'm joined like normal by Juliana.
Hello, everyone.
And we didn't do a podcast last month in April, mostly because Juliana wasn't around in April.
No, but now I'm back.
Now back. Juliana was in rehab for her MS, multiple sclerosis. We talked about this before. No, we didn't. We talked about it on our other podcast.
Yeah.
On our science fiction book review podcast, we mentioned it there. Do you want to mention it here at all? Because we've not really talked about this openly before, have we?
I don't think it has any purpose of why anybody would be interested in what my medical conditions are.
Juliana, her arms don't work very well.
What?
And I'm just saying,
No.
if you see Juliana around and
sitting down
a lot, there's a reason is because she's got multiple sclerosis and has been... what was it? Like we worked out like 12, 13 years ago, you were diagnosed with it. What, 2012, 2013, I guess.
Yeah.
Yes, like 12 years ago, diagnosed with this and was told clearly, hey, every 2 years you can have like 5 weeks off work and rehab. And
I didn't. No, I wasn't told.
Oh, you weren't told?
I wasn't told.
Okay, so
I didn't know
that
I can go on a rehabilitation every 2 years.
Yeah.
To just concentrate on myself. But I've done it for the first time now, and it was really good. And
yes.
It's been helpful.
Hopefully we get your energy levels worked out.
Sorted out a bit more. Yeah.
Energy levels physically, energy levels
cognitively.
I was going to say mentally, but that's not. I guess there's lots of different words that we'll say. It's not like, oh, you've got mental disabilities. No. It's not disabled. It's not anything. It's like a nerve energy issue, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it is. And I mean, it is disabling me in some ways, and it has an impact on my life in other ways that I wasn't aware of. And and so the cognitive limitations come from that illness, and it's not just me or in my head. I mean, it is literally in my head.
It is in your head.
But it is something that I'm now more aware of, and I will try to adjust my life even more.
And also, the reason why we're talking about it here is because we want to be slightly more open about it with other people to make sure... Well, not to make sure, but to make it clear to other people that, not all disabilities are visible, all of this kind of thing. Like, if it's something that we've been living with for the last decade and struggling with more over the last 2 years or so, as it's got slightly worse and developed. But yeah, you've been on drugs for this, experimental drugs back, a while ago, and then only because you were part of a drug experiment for it.
No, it's not drug. It's like study. It's like
it was a study.
Medical studies.
Medical studies.
So the point of this is not all disabilities are visible, and also for the person itself. So for me, it is also not anything that is like I'm displaying physically within my body.
It would kind of be easier for you to accept it if you were in a wheelchair.
like there would be an external factor that I would see, other people would see. But just be aware of people around you. Even if you look at them and say, "Oh, they look healthy," they might not be as healthy as you think.
I mean, you're not unhealthy, but it's like a different axis from health and like disability. Yeah, it's like different things. Anyway, let's move on and thank our Patreon supporters for being very generous with their support.
Yes,
and understanding, and thanks for the messages that we got, because we said on the last podcast that you're going into this therapy rehab thing, and we got some nice messages from people saying, "Oh, all the best for that." So that was very nice for them.
Thank you.
We'd also like to thank people, for their understanding for us not doing a podcast last month. It was literally impossible because I dropped you off at the rehab on the 1st of April, whatever it was. No, May.
No, April.
March, sorry.
March.
First, it wouldn't have been 1st of March.
No, it would have been the 31st of March.
31st of March. Either way, don't worry.
Yes.
And then I didn't see you, and then I saw you 2 weeks later, and then didn't see you again for another 3 weeks because I was working and things. Anyway, let's move on, shall we?
Yeah.
Oh no, I need to thank the Patreon supporters. So thank you very much to Sid and Marshall and Bethany and Callie and Chris. Thank you very much to Danny and Flo and Hendrik and Joel and Matt and Jeremy and Yuli, and thank you very much to Juliana Kunzendorf. You're still supporting me here on Patreon.
I'm supporting you, yes.
Thank you very much. To Kathy, thank you very much. Keith, Mark, Michael, Rafa, Statist, the mysterious Mark, and then lots of other people like Amy and Bo and Charlie and Chloe who are supporting at the $1, the Cascade level.
Yeah, which is amazing.
So
Still,
thank you very much
so
to all of those. We are currently at 55 paid supporters. What do you say? Audience? Paid I know, patrons. Yes, our patrons. So patrons.
They are paying.
It's gone. It's like dropped off a little bit, but whatever. It'll tick up. It always goes
Still
up and down.
Really grateful for the support.
Between 55 and 70. I think we've only ever been above like 65 or 70 a few times, and then So thank you very much to all your support. You really do encourage me to do this and fund fun projects, including this podcast and Fight Night Combat and Top 40 Jugglers and a 3D printer for me to create new juggling props and not scientifically, but investigate new and different forms of juggling props, which we'll talk about in this podcast a bit.
All right.
Also supporting now a new competition format, which is the Your Time to Shine, which we'll do probably a whole podcast about. Maybe next month that'll be the podcast topic where we talk about the competition and the design of that. But the idea is that we have some funding for a big prize, maybe $2,000 worth of funding for a competition. And what should we do with that prize? What should we do with that kind of funding if we've got a few thousand euros? So we are experimenting with buying professional level juggling equipment for people.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
And we are looking forward to some interesting show ideas. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to it.
We want interesting club juggling routines or interesting Glow Club juggling ideas. Hopefully both together, and that's where the prize fund will be spent. So this actually comes out of a podcast that we did last year. So people might realize that when I'm doing these talks, like when we're talking about a subject, part of it is like academic, like, oh, let's just talk about whatever, coaching, whatever, like the last episode was about coaching, which could be academic because am I currently coaching someone? No. Will talking about it help other people become better coaches or recognize the benefits of coaching? Hopefully, yes. But then in the future, it kind of clarifies what kind of things I need to think about. So if in the future someone says, hey, could you coach me with this? Or, could you give me some advice about coaching? I've already thought through everything, both like, in my own brain, and then you and me often have conversations about this.
Yes.
Like, just to be clear, the conversations that we have in this podcast is just like the same conversations that we have, like diving into and nerding out about any other topics.
Yes,
like,
absolutely.
Just this morning, we were looking at race walking and discussing what race walking, triple jump, and breaststroke have in common as like Olympic sports or whatever. So we're always diving into these kind of things. Yesterday it was Eurovision, and we were talking about like how judging works with their all these different kind of factors. So but by having a podcast about it, it's sort of like further clarification and kind of
like the concentrate.
Yeah, like and also kind of like a marker. In other words, like, that's a thing that's worth talking about. Like by doing a podcast about it makes it feel like it's a topic worth thinking about even more. Yeah. Rather than just Luke and Juliana sitting on the couch watching a YouTube video and that sparking a 45-minute discussion about the rules of like race walking or whatever it's going to be, which
I think what it comes down to, I think in that sense we are both quite similar in the sense of how we clarify our thoughts and come to the like in depth of a topic. It's not so much about sitting down and writing. This is more like that's something you do. You can sit down and write something down.
Well, that's what I'm going to talk about in this podcast.
Yes, but in the end, the way that we approach a topic to clarify it for ourselves and for other people is to talk about it.
Well, not even for other people. It's just for the two of us. Yes. But then later, these conversations will inform other things later on. So, for example, we've talked about numbers juggling. I've talked about, like, we did a video about how to fake a juggling world record. Yeah. We talked about friendly rivalries, that, like, juggling records get broken when more people are working on the same thing. Yeah. We talked about, the...
setting up competition formats, like the Cup of the Day thing that we then ran and stuff.
You're interrupting something which is very specifically what I'm trying to set a narrative here, which that falls outside of. Then last year, I also talked about did the thing with social media challenges and social media focused like personal challenges.
Yes.
Where we talked about, trick-a-day maze and weekly challenges and year of this and, Monday mess or Wednesday, whatever it's going to be.
1,000 tricks.
Yeah, 1,000 tricks, 100 days of juggling, of three club juggling. We did, in that podcast, I forgot to mention Max Kushmirtz's 6 and then 7 ball site swap challenge, which is like whenever
very impressive stuff.
He gets 100 catches of a 6 ball site swap, and he gets 100 catches 100 times of 100 different site swaps with 6 balls, and then was like, I'd never be able to do this with 7 balls, and then started it with 7 balls, and is now, I think he's just got past like 55 or 54 different 7 ball site swaps juggled for over 100 catches each.
Wow.
And he's training like the other 45. I'd have to look up exactly halfway. So this comes through, and then I'm talking about, what's the next thing? So if you actually follow it through, you realize that Luke is probably going to do, in fact, in that podcast, I also said I wanted like a social media sharing of a personal juggling project of my own.
Yeah.
And that became the Flash 30 project, which we talked about back in January.
Yes, it started off at the beginning of the year.
Yeah. After I got the top 40 jugglers out of the way, and I got like food poisoning, or was I ill? I can't remember. I got some flu, or maybe it was COVID. Don't know. It didn't. I actually forgot to do a COVID test when I had like a bad cold at the start of the year, which took me out of action for a week. Anyway, so it became the Flash 30. I did a whole podcast about that, and that was like, can Luke improve all of his personal bests by 1 in terms of what he's got on video? So I did 9 rings on video. Can I get 10 rings? I've done 7 clubs on video. I've never done 8 clubs. Can I do 8 clubs? Sorry, 7 clubs to 8 clubs. I've got 11 balls on video. Can I do 12 balls?
Yes.
It turns out, yes. Clubs, tick, no problem. Rings, yes, and I'm working on 11.
Yeah.
Maybe 12 rings, depending on, how much access I have to places with high ceilings to train.
How are the 12 balls coming
12
along?
balls, still trying it multiple times a week, or every time I go juggling where there's a high enough ceiling, I'm trying it for between, 15 to 30 minutes per time. And after that, just energy levels and, strength kind of drops off, and I stop improving. The first few times I'm like, wow, this is so difficult, I can't get it. And then, after 10 minutes, I catch 10 or 11 out of the 12 balls again, and I'm like, oh, it's just right there, and stuff like that. And then I don't get it, and then I delete all of the footage just out of like this, and then, because again, I didn't want the Flash 30 project to end up being Luke is just failing at 12 balls, but it's really difficult for me to keep up the energy or to keep up the motivation to get 12 balls, because unlike 10 rings was something new, I'd never done it before, and unlike 8 clubs was something new and I'd never done it before. 12 balls, I've had 12 balls just sitting in storage here for years, having done it in 2003. So there I'm just trying to do something a second time, but this time on video, and it's not
20
new.
years later.
Yeah, and it's not new, and it's not interesting. I know I can do it, or I know I have been able to do it at some point in the past, so I'm not proving it for myself, not doing anything new, and this is why I'm having to add in these other things, like these other numbers juggling feats, to be like, oh, can I do it all on the same day, or can I also do it with this? And now I've been like, well, I've got to start, do the 7 clubs, break my personal best at 7 clubs, and also maybe I got to work on, if I keep working on 10 rings, 11 rings, and 12 rings, that'll keep my motivation up for general numbers juggling and fitness up, and going to places with high enough ceiling and taking these props along to me to the juggling, so I don't just go, oh, I want to work on a new 3 club routine, and then end up like giving up numbers juggling for literally another 9 years until I try it again or whatever.
And all this stuff because 1 ball.
What?
1 ball not caught.
Yes, 1 ball not caught, or whatever it is.
I can see the challenge concerning the motivation here, for sure.
One of the other stretch goals one of the other things that I wanted to do is clarify what it means to do 12 balls, what it means to do 10 rings, and what it means to do 8 clubs. In terms of, so many people have different ideas about what's valid or not valid in terms of numbers juggling, that it's a bit wishy-washy and a bit mushy about what counts as 12 balls.
Yes.
To the point where are multiplexes allowed? Now, in these different rules, these different numbers juggling rules that there are, there's sometimes it mentions that, sometimes it doesn't. And at the moment, there aren't any rules about numbers juggling. That
like one place where these rules count for everybody.
Like, if we are counting juggling world records, who gets to decide what counts as a juggling world record or not? And and the Flash 30 project's kind of like a stretch goal, which I didn't mention back when I did the launch, it was like, I want to get to the point where I do something which people say, no, that's not valid. And I say, no, it is valid. And they say, no, it's not valid. And I say, show me the rules to say that it's not valid. And then they don't have a leg to stand on. But also, I feel in my own bones that I want what I do to be valid enough that nobody says that's not valid. In the point of, if I, like in that one of the first videos I said, I did an 8-club multiplex one time, but that doesn't count. And nobody said, oh, no, multiplexes are totally fine for a personal best. Like, if you want to claim a personal best that you flashed 8 clubs, that multiplex thing that you did in 2014, totally valid. And I would say, no, it isn't. And nobody else said, no, that's not valid.
For a personal project, like you decide...
Can I claim to have flashed... Like, here, let me just even put it here. The Juggle Wiki, which is, again, one of the places where numbers, jugglers, and personal bests are tracked.
Okay.
It's one of the places. And here, my name has been added here for Luke Burridge in the 8 club section.
Right.
Someone put me there, Luke Burridge, and like Kellen Quinn, and some other people who've recently done it. 8 clubs. My name wasn't on there before. Why not? It's because my previous 8-club flash was a multiplex. So in the juggling world, the vibes are that multiplexes aren't allowed to claim numbers juggling records.
Why not?
Because where does it stop? If I just get 12 balls in my hands, between 2 hands, and just throw them up in inch, like 3 centimeters, 5 centimeters high, and then catch them all again, did I flash 12 balls? Technically, I did. I did a multiplex. I did a 12-ball multiplex. Yeah. Which has meant that I threw 6 balls from one hand, or an average of 6 balls from each hand, up, and then caught them all again.
Right. Okay, so it's about the launching. It's about launching them all at the same time.
There isn't any rules to say why multiplexes aren't allowed.
Right.
There are... on this old page, which is the Juggling Information Service Committee on Numbers Juggling, which up until July 1st, 2012, was keeping track of records for people.
Okay.
And in their rules, it just says multiplex throwing more than one ball at a time from the same hand or presence of more than one ball in a juggler's hands during the time period beginning in the first catch, it's not allowed. So it says that's the definition of multiplexes, and then later on it says multiplexes aren't allowed.
Right.
It doesn't say why. It doesn't say what are the vibes. It doesn't say anything. There isn't any reason. There is no resource online for anyone to know why a multiplex record isn't allowed. And lots of people ask me, we did this workshop on Thursday, and that people are asking me, like, what's the most you can do?
Yeah, these are like people who have never had any contact with juggling.
Yeah. And people ask me, what's the most you can do? And I'm like, and I showed them a 9-ball flash. It took a few, it took like 4 attempts to get it because I only had those workshop balls. I didn't actually have a set of numbers.
Sizes.
They're all different sizes, all different shapes, too big or whatever. But I got the 9-ball flash, no problem.
Yeah.
And then I said, back in 2004, back in 2003, I did 12 balls. And at the time, that was the current world record. And since then, someone's done 13 balls. And a few people have done 13 balls and one person has done 14 balls.
Yeah.
But if then someone says, I could do 14 balls, I could just take them in my hands and throw them and catch them again.
Yeah.
What do I say to someone who asks that question? And I just say, that's not allowed. And people say, why is it not allowed? And there's literally nothing on the internet which says, it's not allowed because of this. This one line here says definition of a multiplex. But these rules for the numbers juggling rules and definitions on the Juggling Information Committee on Numbers Juggling, the JIS-CON, those were adapted from the International Jugglers Association Summer Festival numbers juggling competition. So they're concerned about things which I'm not concerned about.
Right.
And they're saying, these records, the world records will be kept for the following events. Clubs 5 and above. Why not 4? Why not 3? It's because at the time, if you did a 3-club juggling endurance competition, it would last hours.
Yeah.
So they didn't track it. because they were like just doing what was done at an IJA numbers competition, because that was what was done in those numbers competitions.
In a show format.
Well, it's not in a show format, but it's in a live event format.
Yeah, okay.
Those records that could be seen in person and verified with video record, like people would video them, laid the foundational data set for this.
Yeah.
So there wasn't any easy way of showing a 4-hour video of someone juggling 3 clubs or whatever the current world record is for. I think it's up to like 5 or 6 hours for 3 clubs.
God.
There wasn't the technology. So you mean this rule set is based? It's a legacy of the International Jugglers Association numbers juggling competition.
Right.
Passed through another separate thing, which is talking about,
was based on
and if
that.
you read this, it's like this rule set from like the 90s. It's kind of incoherent now. It's talking about what's the definition of a bobble, what's the definition of collecting, and collecting doesn't mean anything. Like but by the rules themselves, collecting means what you do with the props after you've dropped one of them. It's like, it doesn't matter what a collect is in terms of numbers juggling records.
Right.
Anything that happens after the point where you should have caught something and you didn't catch that one, and that one didn't end up in your hands and instead touch the floor or whatever.
Yeah.
Anything that happens after that is meaningless in terms of numbers juggling.
Right.
Because that's where the counting stops.
Yeah. The catch is the catch or drop.
Yeah. Or no, it's what happens. How many catches happen sequentially before the first time you should have caught a ball, but you didn't catch the ball?
Right.
Because if you then say, how long it takes before it hits the ground, you're like immediately like, well, I'm going to juggle on top of the Empire State Building 7 balls, and I'm going to juggle them, and I'm just going to let, 6 of them drop. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to do 1 ball juggling really, 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 really quickly, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you could get to like maybe 100 catches before all. I don't actually know, but I'm just saying off the top of my head. Like if we're talking tallest building in the world, let's say Burj Khalifa, because that is the tallest building in the world. Like how many balls can you drop off the top of them, and before those balls touch the ground,
do more catches
underneath? You know what I mean? So there is a reason why that is consecutive catches of all of the balls in order before the first time that you should have caught something but didn't catch it, and then that is then classed as the moment we stop counting.
Right.
So yeah, there are reasons for all of this, but none of them are explained in the rules, and it's all still based on vibes.
Yeah, it's vibes and historically grown like concepts and ideas of a totally different concept, like of a live show, live event format taken for then something that people can do at any time, anywhere. And not clarified for then continuing evolving of literally everything, technology, props,
prop
people,
design,
whatever.
But also, very importantly, video recording technology as well. So there's this thing happened last year, which I found very upsetting, which is somebody flashed 13 rings for the first time. That's not the upsetting part.
Right.
Daniel Lysenko. Lysenko? Yeah. Flashed 13 rings for the first time.
Yeah, I watched that video.
It's
very
amazing,
very
very impressive, and claimed I'm the first person to do it, and then had to adjust it. No, I'm the first person to do this on video, and then have to adjust it again. No, I'm the first person to do it on video with public accessible video.
Right.
And then Albert Lucas released the video of his 13 ring flash.
Yes.
But then it was released as like via an announcement on the IJA e-juggle blog, and then it was kept as a unlisted video. So if you type into YouTube 13 ring flash, that video still doesn't come up. Oh, maybe they've changed it now.
Yeah.
But like it's this whole thing, and I'm like, so Albert Lucas did this 13 ring flash in 2002. At the time, I was discussing it. I was discussing it with all friends of mine. Talked about it with like Peter Bone, who was into numbers juggling back then. He's like, oh yeah, it was probably done with holsters. And Peter Bone is like, ring holsters shouldn't count towards, like if you use ring holsters, your juggling doesn't count. And
a purist.
A purist. But the thing is it a purist, or have people been using ring holsters to do numbers juggling with rings since, I don't know, before Peter Bone was born? Yes, they have. Like people like Sergei Ignatov was using ring holsters. Like ring holsters are a general, like it's a an accepted form. But again, why are there no rules for this? And also, I agree with him. I would love that me working out this ring holster design and using ring holsters to flash like 12 rings.
Yeah.
If I do that and then someone says, oh no, that's not valid because you used a ring holster, or you put too many rings in the ring holster, or there weren't enough rings in your hand, I would love for that then not to count. But it has to count because the previous 12-ring record by Willie Colombione, he's doing the same thing, if you know what I mean.
Like, why are there not two different categories?
Well, let me get onto this. But the sad story is, another person that I talked to about this record was Ben Beaver. And we were like, oh yeah, we really want to see this record. And I talked to somebody, somebody who saw the video of Albert Lucas doing 12 rings, because they showed it at a juggling convention in a show format. And he was like, oh, was that it? It was like over in like 6 seconds or whatever. But nobody got to see it except for the people at the Juggling Information Service. Right. And I'm talking about it to people. Ben Beaver started working on, he was working on 12 balls and 13 balls. And like there was no video, nobody could see how somebody had broken a world record. But it counted as a world record because it was submitted to
some people saw it.
The Juggling Information Service Committee on Numbers Juggling people had a video of it. But it wasn't publicly available. Nobody could see if it was correct or not. And then, before it was released publicly, Ben Beaver died by falling off the balcony in front of his house, and never got to see that video. So this is like, I find it super upsetting that this can be claimed as a video and only released when somebody else matches it. It's like the mindset for someone to be like that is so far completely outside of my own way of thinking about how juggling should work, how the juggling community should work, how records should work, how everything should do it. Like, when I'm just talking about the vibes of something, doing something and keeping it secret from everyone, but still claiming that you've done it, but a committee of people who we don't know who's on the committee. They're just sitting behind...
don't know.
Again, this was a committee in 2002. He did the record, submitted it then. The website of the Committee on Numbers Juggling hasn't been updated since 2012.
Right.
And if you remember our podcast about the history of jugglers building the internet, it's because the person who runs the internet has got a patent claim on literally how Google Earth works, that you click something and it uses GPS coordinates to find things closest to it, which is like, how all of the internet works now. Whenever there's anything mapped, you click something, it works out what the GPS is, and then works out what the closest thing is in GPS. The Juggling Information Service website is the first example of that. Right. On the internet. And so the website is kept there for historical, technical, patent reasons, but it hasn't been updated. So anytime that you used to type in, where's the closest local juggling club, there's this whole website sitting there with non-functional, out-of-date information. Now, of course, someone clicks on there like, wow, how old is this website? It's from the 90s. Yes, it is from the 90s. It's literally a piece of internet history. Unfortunately, the committee kept doing their job. So that means that a world record was being claimed by a committee which was no longer functioning, no longer keeping it up. But then Albert Lucas was still claiming this record of 13 rings, even though there was nobody had seen it. Like there was witnesses to it, but it wasn't in the Guinness World Record. There was no publicly available record, like videos and stuff like that. So this whole thing kind of rubbed me up the wrong way, vibes-wise. And I'm not saying that he's wrong to do it, because again, there aren't any rules. He was doing it he followed the rules at the time to claim a world record of 13 rings, which is 13 rings for 13 catches, with a video that he sent on a VHS tape that he sent to some Americans who were using their own rule set. They said it was good, it was listed on the website, and then
everything done
that
correct.
Just had to be accepted. Meanwhile, the people who are most interested in the world at numbers juggling, in other words, me, Peter Bone, Ben Beaver, and other people like that, 30% of us die before it's ever possible to say what was good. Was it a good record? Was it valid? Do we agree with that?
Just seeing it.
Or just seeing it. Just seeing it that it's possible. Like seeing how it's possible. If you know what I mean. Yeah. So again, this was another thing for me to think about this Flash 30 was sort of like these things need to be out in the open. What is valid, what is not? Are ring holsters valid, what is not? So this whole discussion about, and this is why I don't want to get onto actually actually what I think the rules should be in this podcast. Because I think what the rules should be is, again, just based on Luke vibes.
Yeah.
And who makes me the most important person to decide what this is?
Well, no, you yourself.
Yeah, me myself. However, weirdly, I do feel some kind of, like, not ownership, but like that I have some kind of, not even say. What am I trying to say? Here's another vibes thing for me. I set up a page on the internet, on Wikipedia, the Wikipedia page, Juggling World Records.
Right.
Which is, if anybody ever types in, what's the juggling world record for this?
Yeah.
This page is, I wanted this page to be like clearly the thing that should be there.
Yeah.
Okay, so
that's the canon where
it's
people
like
go
canonical. So people look
Yeah.
at there, and on there there would be like, what's a personal claim, what's verified with publicly available video evidence, what's listed by a juggler, like the Guinness Book of World Records.
What are the prop categories?
Yeah,
maybe?
that kind of thing. So I set up that page, and over the years, like, I worked hard at it, and there was discussions about it, and people were like, hey, we should list the chainsaw world record. And I was like, no, I kind of wanted to be really clear that there's 4 main props, which is like balls, clubs, rings, and bouncing. And in each one of those categories, 2 things: solo records and passing records.
Right.
And I was like, if we just keep it like that, that's really clear, because juggling is generally considered 3, but also if you want to include bouncing, and I included those because there was a bounce records page at the time, which was a rival to the Juggling Information Service Committee on Numbers Juggling, because they didn't track bounce juggling.
Right.
And somebody did want to track bounce juggling, so the bounce jugglers got together, or somebody tracked, publicly available video evidence records with bounce juggling. And those included some records which Luke vibes were like, no, you can't just say someone touched a ball and consider it a catch. But they're like, yeah, but with bounce juggling, you don't ever really catch a ball because it just kind of comes into your hand and you kind of redirect it. You just give it a little bit of lift. So touching is actually as good as... So anyway, I didn't want to get into that because I don't care enough about bounce juggling numbers juggling or records to ever get involved in that. Meanwhile, I did once have the 4-ball bounce world record endurance.
Yes.
Because again, it was just in another world record thing when I was looking at some lists. I was like, hey, I can get that world record. So I live streamed it back in 2017.
That was an awful period of time where it was like boom, 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 boom in the house.
It only took like 3 days for me to get it.
It was
an awful period of time. It was like I was just working on some bounce juggling at the time. Although I worked on some club juggling, like the 3-club world record at the time. Anyway, so here's the thing, vibes-wise. What are the vibes? What is it? So based on the currently available videos and these lists, like the Juggling Information Service, in whenever it was that I set up the Juggling World Record page, I just used the categories that are listed on the numbers record, JIS numbers world record here.
Yeah.
Which is prop specifications. It says clubs, which include sticks and batons, must be long, roughly cylindrical objects. That's it. That's the only definition.
Okay.
That's what they had up until 2012. For clubs, just must be long. Because again, if you ever want to think about this more rigorously and you want to make records about it, you would then actually have to define what a club is and what is a club and what is not a stick. So at the time, various people, and historically it's still here because this hasn't been updated since 2012.
The internet is still in archive mode there.
No, it's not in archive mode. This website hasn't been updated.
Yeah.
And it says here, 9 clubs and sticks. Bruce Timon in 1996 did 9 catches with 9 sticks. And there's a personal video. And these records are actually, these videos have since been uploaded to, YouTube, so you can find these records.
Okay.
Scott Sorensen, 1997, 9 catches, personal video. Chris Fowler, 9 catches in 2003. So 3 people before 2012 had personal videos of them doing 9 catches with 9 sticks. And when you look at the sticks, you're like, yeah, they're like Diablo hand sticks or, devil stick hand sticks. Or drumsticks or whatever they have. One had sort of like some sections from tent poles and was like, oh, can I do this? Yes, I can do this. And it took him like 2 days to be able to get the 9 very specifically 9 stick flash.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's head over to the new website, which is jugglingrecords.com, and they've got this page which is world record rules. Now, if you see, the Juggling Information Service rules are like 2 pages of very wide text. Here, you've got like 7 lines which are actually relevant. And they say clubs must be roughly cylindrical objects with well-defined narrower handle section and a wider body section. Now you're thinking, all right, that does define a club a little bit more than just long, roughly cylindrical objects.
What's a tennis racket then?
A tennis racket is long, but it is not cylindrical.
Oh, yeah.
Let's get on to tennis rackets a bit later.
Yeah.
Okay, if we're going to deep dive onto what is a club, maybe that's what the rest of this podcast will be about. As an example of a discussion that you can have, which is...
Like how deep can you go into the weeds?
How deep can you go into one specific thing, which is what is a club? If you want, we can just do this.
No. I'm not
saying. No, I'm saying this is actually a good thing because I don't want to get into what I think a club is, or maybe I can't. Maybe this can be an example of why I think it's important for for there to be a generally agreed upon definition or description or dimensions of what a club is for the purposes of club juggling world records. Because what happened was that then. If we look at this page here, which is let me actually look at world records, and then I've got to click on 9 clubs, and then there's this page which is a timeline thing. So now here we are on jugglingrecords.com /world_record_progression.
Right.
Something 9 clubs. So what we're looking at now is what the website, which is called juggling.records.com, which is set up by Tom Whitfield and Ivan and some, I think, other people. But it's their project there.
It's a newer project. It's certainly something that's still ongoing.
It's a continuous ongoing project.
Yeah.
This is where you go into the numbers league, and this is where people track their records and stuff like this. So I'm not saying this is wrong. I'm just saying the vibes that they have...
And current.
Again, the vibes of these people I've disagreed with in the past when they set up the Numbers Juggling League and wimpy patterns weren't allowed. The sync crossing patterns weren't. Based on their vibes, and then they included them based on vibes of, like, the people taking part, which were like, what if I break the juggling world record with 14 balls with, like, a wimpy pattern? Would that be included in the Numbers Juggling League? And it turns out, yes. They were decided, yes, it is. So again, nothing is set in stone here. But check out this juggling world record progression for 9 clubs overall. 2013, Emil Dahl with 9 clubs in a cascade. Watch the video. Let me just click on this video. This video isn't available anymore. But whatever. Emil Dahl got ashamed of his club juggling and wanted to do ring juggling and took down the video of his juggling world record. So it's no longer publicly accessible world record. But nobody is disputing the fact that he did this, And I, of course, have downloaded all these videos myself. So if anybody wants to see Emil Dahl videos, I can send them to you or show them to you. Maybe I'll upload them as an unlisted video on YouTube as well. Who cares? Look, this is a bit of juggling history. But it starts where? It starts in 2013. The Numbers Juggling World Records on the JSCon ends in 2012. So this happened a year after they stopped tracking it. As soon as Emil Dahl got 9 clubs for 9 catches, the 9 the 9 stick records, which were included on Wikipedia, someone just edited them out. And from then on, only tracked people who had done 9 clubs with real clubs. But didn't explain why. And I was kind of miffed with that because I was like, but yes, I know that sticks aren't clubs. But previously we all agreed that sticks were equivalent to clubs. Up until the point where one person did it with clubs. And now we all agree that sticks are not equivalent to clubs. And those records are no longer on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Which I just didn't get into an edit war with somebody or want to explain this because it was just somebody else's vibes were saying that. And they're not included on the world record progression for 9 clubs overall. But up until 2012, they were considered part of the overall juggling world records, which is, it says here, 5 clubs, Thomas Dietz, Anthony Gatto, 6 clubs, Anthony Gatto, 7 clubs, Anthony Gatto, 8 clubs, and then Bruce, Scott, and Chris, 9 clubs actually sticks.
Right. Oh, wow, this is so messy.
It's not messy.
No, I think it is messy.
It's quite easy to understand. And I understand why people don't vibe with sticks not being classed as clubs.
Yeah.
I also think that sticks are not clubs. And I also think that sticks shouldn't be classed as clubs for the purposes of record keeping. But I do not vibe with literally erasing these people, Bruce, Scott, and Chris, from the juggling world record timeline history. why is it why is everything just by vibes? And by vibes, I mean there isn't anything written down except on one records page rules, they say a club which includes sticks and batons must be long, roughly cylindrical objects. And the other ones say, I've lost the page here. Nope, still lost the page here. Where am I going back? I just been on this one. I guess I can click on the rules page. Clubs must be roughly cylindrical objects with a well-defined narrow handle section and a wider body section, which immediately excludes these sticks, which people previously
did include. I think the problem here is first of all, the community is so diverse and also so global that you can have certain clusters and even historical clusters of people writing down rules for what they,
I understand what you're saying.
And also, I think these kind of, and I'm now calling it a problem because it is literally a game design problem.
Yeah.
This is not the first time this has ever occurred in any sort of activity.
Okay.
And like just looking at sports, and I'm quoting it here in the air, like air quotes. Like if you look at, for example, motorsports.
Yeah.
Historically, by just historical development, it is not that old. So there has been a start of something that people started doing something, and then some people had to come down, sit down, and write rules. And here's my thing: if you say, like, if you, for example, take Formula One rules, they are still evolving.
But here's the thing: Formula One is a competition. I think there should be very strict definitions of what props are allowed in a competition. Say if you're doing a numbers juggling competition, I could just say they have to be, again, this is not what I think, but I think there is a good argument to say clubs have to be this size and shape, rings have to be this size and shape, and balls have to be this size and shape.
Yeah.
For the purposes of competition,
yes.
Because then if you don't like that, that's fine. However, in terms of records and world record progression, I think there should be a lot more, it should be a lot freer and a lot more concept-based rather than restriction-based.
So more inclusive in terms of categories?
No, not so much that. If you want to win the Formula One World Championships, that you have to spend millions to make the fastest car possible within an insanely rigorous and arbitrary set of rules, because those rules are around, if we allow these cars to go so fast, they'd have jet engines to go. They would have rocket launch, rocket powered for going down the straight. They would have dynamic aerodynamics. And if any one thing goes wrong at any part of the lap, that driver will die, other drivers will die, and they will be rocket launched into the crowds, and 15 people will be decapitated and 100 people will die, which is literally what happened in the past in Formula One.
Yeah.
The cars were too dangerous for the technology at the time, and then you get the Mercedes in 1950s literally crashing into another car, ripping apart, going into the stands, people being literally decapitated. They were just laying out dead people along the side of the track, and the race kept running until someone won. That's what it was like. And so now when you say, okay, it has to be safe. There has to be safety rules. There has to be
juggling is not quite as dangerous.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. But there's a reason why there's lots of rules in Formula One. Part of it is so the cars go really quickly, but a lot of it is because we don't want them to go too quickly, because then it gets too boring and too dangerous. You know what I mean? But when you say how fast can a car go, they're like, we want to make a supersonic car. Putting a rocket on a car, great. Do it. A rocket on a car is fine. A jet engine on a car, if you just want to get, the SSC, the supersonic car, the thrust, whatever it was called, they just had 2 massive jet engines on the side, and they had 4 wheels, because the rules are that it has to be a car, has to have at least 4 wheels. But the 4 wheels aren't even in the 4 corners of the car. There's 2 at the front, and then the 2 at the back are in line. So it's like a
trike.
Oh, it's not a trike, because the 2 wheels at the back are trailing wheels, and they are in line with each other. because that was the most stable thing, but they still had to have 4 wheels. But it really only needed 3 wheels. And then there's this rocket car as well, which was much faster, but it only had 3 wheels. It was pretty much just a rocket with 3 wheels. And it went faster than any other car, but it didn't have 4 wheels.
So it wasn't a car.
And also, these cars have to go both directions down the same course.
Right.
Like, so if there's wind, it has to go into the wind one way, then it has to turn around, and within an hour, set the same speed, or set a speed in the opposite direction. You average out the 2 speeds. So we're saying definitionally the fastest car in the world, it has to have 4 wheels, has to go both ways down a track, and we average out the speed of both ways down the same straight bit of track.
Yeah.
And it's not even a track. They're always in like the Atacama Desert or whatever.
Right. So these are like the extreme tries of like defining what a car is and being fast. And then you have categories where it's just the fastest consumer car.
But that's if you actually look at like world's fastest car, you got world's fastest electric car, world's fastest diesel car, world's fastest production car, world's fastest car in a circle or whatever, like that. World's fastest car going backwards. So for an on-the-day competition, I think give everyone literally the same set of props.
Yeah.
And they have to do it with the same competition props. And all, sports doing this, in baseball, it's not just like you can't have you can't take too many drugs, but also you have to use a wooden bat and not an aluminium bat. If you use an aluminium bat, every hit would be a home run outside the stadium, so they have to say no wooden bats for baseball. Yeah. So I think standardized equipment is good for in-person competition, on the day competition, who's best today at this live event.
Yeah.
But I would love for like the extreme records for allow people to to use technology and new manufacturing techniques and new whatever techniques to be able to come up with an advantage to set a personal best or a world record.
Yeah.
Is what I think. So I was talking before about what's the tallest building in the world, because I want to set a record by throwing some balls in the air and then juggling fewer balls before the first balls hit the ground.
Yeah.
This kind of thing happened. It used to be tallest building in the world, very vibes based.
Yeah, and everybody knows what a building is, right?
Yes, everyone knows what a building is, but is a pyramid a building? And you're like, is a pyramid a building? So this was an example that I've used in this like discussion document. I'm just saying this discussion that I'm having with you now on the podcast. I've had this same discussion with other jugglers, maybe 10 other jugglers who are interested in this kind of thing, talking about these kind of things, and this kind of like idea of like what is a club. So you had the Chrysler Building, Empire State Building, and then you had the Petronas Towers, where the top floor was higher than the Empire State Building, but the top of the spire of the Empire State Building was higher than this one, if you know what I mean.
Are spires a building?
Well, that's the thing. There was a committee of this. Like there used to be a committee on numbers juggling, which would define what numbers juggling records were. There's the committee, I've written it down here, the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat. And these are the guys who keep lists and actually have criteria. And they had, at one point, there were 3 to 4 different criteria of what's the tallest building. Even if you say, how about a very small building on a very tall mountain? It's like, that doesn't count. That's a high building. That's not a tall building. So even like depending on what the word tall means, and then it's sort of like, okay, where's the front door of the main concourse outside the front door? So basement levels don't count. Front door, like what's the floor level outside the front door? Yeah, floor level outside the front door is ground level, and then let's measure upwards from there. But where do you stop measuring? Do you stop measuring the highest place someone can stand? Is it the highest usable floor? Is it the architectural high point of the building? Is it the top of a spire on top of the building? Or is it on top of an antenna, on top of a spire, on top of an architectural part of the building, which is above the highest standable point, which is above the highest usable floor?
Well, I'm glad I don't have to decide that.
And here's the thing, nobody has to decide it anymore, because the Burj Khalifa wins on every single one of those metrics. It's not just the highest building, it's also the highest tower. And a tower don't need usable floors all the way up. Right. So like the Berlin TV tower is like 370 meters tall. But it's not classed as the tallest building in Berlin. It's the highest tower in Berlin.
Right.
If you stand up there, you're above any other building. But what we class as a building, it has to have usable floors all the way up. You can't just get into a lift, press next floor up, and go 400 meters in the air and get off. A building has to have usable floors all the way up and down it, like a skyscraper.
It sounds sensible.
So here we actually have these different things here, with the Eiffel Tower here, Ulmer Minster, which is the highest religious building and stuff, because for a while Empire State Building is tallest. Then you see this graph here, various broadcast masts up until 2010, there was a broadcast mast which is like tethers, so it's got things on strings.
Yeah,
it's supported
to fix it to the ground.
Yeah, and you're like, oh yeah. Well, it's a tall building. Could it, if you're allowed to support it on strings, how about a observation blimp with a cable running up to it? Is that a tower? Is it a building? No, it has to be architecturally solid. But now all of that is mute because the Burj Khalifa wins on every category and is unquestionably the tallest building in the world and has been since 2010.
Right. But people can get very nerdy about these kind of like literally graphs and things.
No, it's not that people can get nerdy about it. It's because there is a committee on tall buildings and urban habitat, because they have now made a system where they can rate any building, importantly, and this is very importantly, before the building is built,
right?
They can say, this will be a valid building. This height that you say here will be what we, as a committee on tall buildings, we will list this building here. Now, what this has done, it has changed the architecture of the world.
Right.
Because now, this picture that I'm showing Juliana here, all of these red bits on top of the buildings, this is what is called vanity height on buildings.
Right.
Anything above this
Something
line,
that's stuck on top of clearly a building.
No, and I'm going to be very precise about this. This is not stuck on top of a very tall building. This is included in the original designs and built into the original building. So a spire, an antenna, is something which is just stuck on the top of a very tall building.
Right.
This is something that is included in the architectural plans. It has to be architecturally significant.
Right.
So spires are included, but antenna are not included.
Yeah, I was just mainly looking at the World Trade Center tower.
Yes, I understand that.
Thing.
But the word that you used, stuck on top, is not allowed to be included. Yes. But included on top, or designed to be on top or at the top part of the building is allowed.
Yeah.
And this clarification means that anytime anyone is building a new building in any city in the world or any region in the world or any continent in the world or any whatever in the world, they can claim, if they know the rules on the Committee on Urban Habitats and stuff, Committee on Tall Buildings, they can say, we have the tallest building outside of America. We have the tallest building on this side of the Mississippi. We have the tallest building in this state. We have the tallest building in China. We have the tallest building in the Southern Hemisphere. And because everybody agrees in advance that they have the thing, there is no ambiguity. And what has happened is, since these rules were clarified, and everybody started using them in the, since there was Taipei 101, World Trade Center, Willis Tower, Petronas Tower, and the Empire State Building, in there's that period from the 30s
centimeter kind of like.
Nobody had to worry about this when it was just the Empire State Building, which was built finished in the 1930s, off the back of like a big boom in the 20s, and then there was a financial crash, and we just didn't need that kind of towers anymore. And then the World Trade Center was still in New York and taller than that. And then the Willis Tower, which people know as the Sears Tower, was it was unambiguous because all of these big things were just in one country and all designed by the same.
And nobody cared.
It was vibes based up until like the early 2000s when Taipei 101 and these other things came along. Let's say 90s, and someone said, we can't do this vibes based anymore. And this is my important clarification: is as soon as you actually have some rules in place. When the Burj Khalifa was coming along, all they wanted was the tallest building in the world. And they knew in advance the rules that they must follow to be considered the tallest building in the world.
Yeah. So they made sure they did.
They made sure that they followed the rules so there was no ambiguity and everybody else knew what the final line was. And it was very handy that the Burj Khalifa came along because they unified all of the other rules. It's like in boxing or wrestling or something. There's lots of different titles. And then one person will be so good that they unify all of the boxing titles. And they hold, the World Boxing Association, the World Championship Boxing Association, the International Boxing Champion, and they're just like the undisputed world heavyweight of the world. They've unified all of the titles into one thing. And that is what happened with this thing here. I'll see if I can get back to the same thing. World record progression for 9 club overall. Eivind did 11 catches with clubs, which is very handily in 2016. It's more catches than anybody ever did with sticks.
Yes. Clearly put him on that, definitely.
So we don't have to, if we're worried about now, who was the first to ever do 11 catches with clubs? Eivind. Who has the most catches with 9 clubs? With 9 clubs. Yeah. With 9 clubs, Eivind.
Yes.
Who has the most catches with any long cylindrical objects with narrower handles and wider bodies?
9 of them.
9 of them. Eivind. Who has the world record with any stick-like objects that are long and cylindrical, that include sticks and batons? Eivind. So we're actually at the Eivind is the Burj Khalifa at the moment of world records, club juggling, but still based purely on vibes.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. If I, as part of my Flash 30 project, didn't do 8 clubs, and instead got some, like the carbon sticks that I put inside the clubs, the light ones, if I'd have just done 8 of those carbon sticks, may have been more difficult, may have been harder. I don't know at that point, because I actually think the club shape and the nice handles helps in this case. It helps separate the clubs out in your hands. Yeah. And you can see them better in the air.
And the physics works. Seem to work a bit smoother.
Sticks can be difficult to control. They could be too light to control, whatever. It might be more difficult to get 11 catches with sticks than it is to get 11 catches with the clubs. I don't know. I've never tried 9 clubs.
But then you don't have any wrong-handed catches.
No, yes, you don't have any wrong. You can't catch the club by the wrong end. Yeah. So vibes-based, it's actually really, because we are still in a vibes-based world record in terms of juggling records, I think it's good, but we are literally one person deciding sticks should count and doing a 10-stick flash and saying, count me, someone count this. I've done something which is not clubs, but also 10 sticks is not 10 balls, and it's not 10 rings. It's a different thing than 10 balls, and it's a different thing with 10 rings. And I'm saying, why should that person not be included in some kind of world records? Yeah. And I'm absolutely not saying that they should be able to claim the 10 club world record, but I am saying that they should be able to claim some kind of long stick-like object world record, which aren't clubs, because I do think clubs are different and are special and should be tracked differently. But then who keeps those records?
Yeah, and how thin and how
yeah, at the time,
how can you go?
The only people seriously tracking world records is World Records, world-records.com, which sounds like that sounds like where this should be tracked. But somebody there, based on vibes, which again, I don't disagree with the vibes, decided that sticks don't count and clubs do count, but then there's no rules, there's no explanation of why sticks don't count, and also there's no rules to say what counts as a club and what counts as a stick. Yeah. How short could the stick be? What's the minimum length of a stick? I could do, if I make my sticks really, really short and quite chunky, but still with a narrower section which is called a handle, and which is a wider section which is called the body of the club, and I did a flat, Juliana's pointing at these little hyperboloid club templates that I like, the
little
test things,
printouts,
which are tiny. They're 6 centimeters long each, or 5 centimeters long each. Yeah, if I flashed, if I did 10 of these,
sounds difficult.
Yes, it would be very. Again, I'm not saying it would be easier to do this, but there aren't any rules to say what's the minimum length of a club, what's the minimum width of a club, how different must the club handle be to the width of the body. Yeah. Does it have to have a knob? Here's another thing: if you catch a club by the wrong end, does it count or not? And because if it does count, it does. So all of this is vibes based.
And also, just looking at this, I have nothing against any of this. Yeah. However, this, the website and this stuff, the site that's currently open, the world record, what does it say?
World record progression for 9 club overall. Yeah.
And something that can start at 2013 without any asterisks anywhere explaining that when they started, or why this is included and not other things. Yeah. That kind of is a bit.
And I'm not saying this is wrong. No, I'm not saying this is. I'm not saying that they should have that.
It feels incomplete
because it's very clear that this is 9 clubs. And on the Juggling Information Service Committee on Numbers Juggling, they were like, clubs and sticks Schnubs and Schnicks. It doesn't matter. Like sticks, the equivalent sticks and battens are equivalent to clubs. They just have to be long and flippy, not round and a single point in the air, and not
or a hole in the middle.
Not round. No, because even they considered plates and rings to be the same thing. Because they wanted to maybe think about records back when rings didn't exist and jugglers would just juggle plates.
Right.
So are plates part of the world record progression with
rings?
With disc, ring disc-like objects? And I would say yes, they are, but kind of irrelevant because it was so long ago that there's no publicly available video evidence for this.
Sure, but you should still somewhere mention that.
Maybe. And that's the thing, maybe. Juggling Records, juggling-records.com they think that the club record should begin with clubs, not sticks.
Yeah, but then mention it somewhere.
They don't have to mention it because there are no rules. Yeah, there is nothing in the juggling world to say what a club is versus what a club isn't.
Yeah.
It's vibes based. You'll say, well, I'll know it when I see it. But I think Willie Colombione's clubs are I actually do think they're clubs. I think they're good enough to be called clubs, but they are smaller and thinner than anybody else's clubs. So should that count? I say yes, it should count. But also...
And your clubs, when you do modify them, they are lighter.
They're lighter.
And have... individualized properties that nobody can buy.
Yeah, so it's all vibes based.
It is for me very messy.
I've mentioned this to a few people in the past, which I think it's insane that juggling has an emoji. There's a committee in the world which decides what juggling, what things should be emojis.
The Unicode committee.
The Unicode consortium decide how the world is going to communicate with what are the standard small pictures of what a thing is.
And how important it is
that when you type into any keyboard anywhere in the world on any computer and you hold down the function key to show the emoji for it, there's a symbol for it. And what is that symbol? Now, most of those things are a lot of those things are abstract. There's no committee on what a hospital is. So when you type in hospital, the hospital emoji comes up. But there is, for when you type in trains, there are 1,000 committees on what trains look like. There's train model people, there's train spotter people, everything's written down. What's a train? What's the longest train? What's the smallest train? What's the fastest train? There's cars, bikes, everything has committees. Flags, there's this new thing where the emoji people were like, look, we can't start now talking about
city flags.
Yeah, no, they were
flags?
We don't want to decide who gets to have a country flag or not, because we're now deciding
what is a country?
What is a country? And that is really fraught. And they're like, we aren't going to do that. So they said there's an international standard for 3-letter designations for what counts as a country or not. Germany is DEU. The UK is GBR, USA, FRA for France, There's a whole committee just deciding who gets an official ISO standard 3-letter code for their country.
Right.
And the emoji people said, the Unicode consortium said, look, there's a committee over here, and all they do is decide, are you country enough that you get this? So if this committee gives you a 3-letter code to use in an international standard, which say if these letters go in, every single computer system in the world, you can type in FRA and you say, tell me what that is. France pops out. They decided what that is, and they said, and so the emoji committee said, every time that you type in a 3-letter code into this other standard, this flag pops out.
Right.
And if there isn't that standard, if it's not included in the standard, we're not going to now add a flag for it. Some flags are grandfathered in, and some other ones are done with different codes, you know what I mean? But they're not every state is going to get a flag because there's a different committee on what state flags are, or, whatever it is. You see what I'm saying? How many levels down do you have to go to?
Yeah.
With the emoji juggling symbol, I think juggling is one of the most recognizable things in the world.
So odd.
With only vibes-based record keeping.
Yeah.
And there are no official world records. There's a Wikipedia page which people can decode and go, oh, you're just linking to YouTube videos. It's like, yeah, we're just linking to YouTube videos. And then which YouTube videos don't get edited out in a Wikipedia edit war is based on vibes. Juggling world records, again, I'm not saying anyone's vibes are wrong. I'm saying it's all vibes based. And we've just talked about the definition of a club. And I think the definition of a club should be, for records purposes, the body has to be 8 centimeters across, 80 millimeters across. So like a typical PX3 / pirouette, style club. Commercially available club, because clubs are designed to look really good and feel really nice when you juggle between 3 and 5 of them. Right. And what makes this club world record progression for 9 club overall, started by Emil Dahl, what makes it so impressive is that he was using the something which, just looking at it, is a commercially available club.
Right.
Which is 8 centimeters across body, around about 48 to 52 centimeters long, has a narrower handle, and isn't weird shaped. And by weird shaped, you mean that the whole body is it's like a convex curve for the whole body, and then like a straight, or like a dowel. Well, it's not so much a straight, but like a narrow handle. So you have to be able to hold, between 3, like up to 3 in your hand.
Yeah.
And that's what a normal juggling club is. And any time that you see, I was looking on the Play website the other day, because I was looking up, someone asked how much to play juggling clubs or something.
Yeah.
And I looked it up, and one of them says, oh, these handles are slightly thinner, so these are slightly better for if you want to do like more than 3 in one hand. So if you want to do 7 clubs, get these ones. And these other ones have got slightly chunkier handles, which are kind of softer on your hand and nicer for juggling 3 clubs. And I was like, yes. Nice. The reason why 9 clubs with standard clubs is impressive and stick juggling isn't so impressive, stick flashing isn't so impressive, is because it was done with commercially available, like the clubs which are the size and shape of commercially available clubs.
Yeah.
Which means that I think for world record purposes, a club should have a minimum length of 48 centimeters, to include anyone who puts like a short handle on a short club. Right. Like if you're Kellen Quinn and you just have a whole box of like, these are short handle clubs and these are long handle clubs, and these are short body clubs and these are short long body clubs. What if I put a long handle with a long body, or a short handle? Like, he's doing all of that, but when he puts the short handle on the short club, it's only like 47 centimeters long, but it's still a club, it's still recognizably a club. The size of the size of the body, let's say, I would say nothing concave is allowed. So you can't have like a club which comes here and then has like a sticky out bit, like a toilet plunger bit, and then it goes narrower again. Like, it has to be like, bulb shaped.
Yeah,
like,
well, these existed in the
radical fish clubs, which have lumps sticking out of them. I'd say those shouldn't be standard clubs, and they're not standard clubs.
They're not standard clubs.
They're called radical for a reason, because they're like different and they have like a radial bit sticking out.
Right, but I would now argue here, and I intersect here, that if you do juggle those, and you do a big amount of them, I think you can then still claim that that's the world record for these clubs.
At the moment there's a club, but I would say let's disallow them. Let's make sure all clubs at the widest point are 80 centimeters.
Right.
Sorry, not 80 centimeters, 80 millimeters, and a minimum of 48 centimeters. I'm switching between centimeters and millimeters. I would say knobs shouldn't have to be included, because what happens if during a world record attempt a knob falls off? Say this is with an endurance world record. I'd say the reason why it's impressive to do 9 of them is because if you catch them by the wrong end, it makes it more difficult. Which means that it's more difficult. So you either have to control the spin of them and catch them by the handles, or if you don't catch them all by the handles, it's harder to catch them in your hand by the wrong end. So I would say wrong-endedness is made difficult by the fact that the fat end of a club is fat.
It's thicker than the handle.
It's thicker. Yeah. I would say weight shouldn't be counted, because you can't see that. There's no video evidence for weight. You can look at the clubs and say, yes, they look about right. Again, that's based on vibes, but you can see if they're the wrong size or shape. Generally,
I mean, literally, there are like things where you have to before or after weigh yourself, or the thing that you do.
Again,
is like
for competition when everyone's in the same room. Yes, test for drugs. make sure nobody is, having gloves with webbing between the fingers to catch more balls.
Stuff on the...
Sticky stuff, all of this kind of stuff. But for general juggling, I would say put some parameters in place for what is a club, and then count anything that's not a club, call it a non-standard stick or flippy thing. So this is something that you throw by flipping rather than throw by spinning, like rotating like a ring, or just by chucking like a ball, where the spin doesn't make it bigger, doesn't make it more controlled, because it's just a point moving in space. A club is a thing which flips end over end, and then those can be tracked as sticks if they don't comply. So also included in sticks could be batons, could be narrower clubs, could maybe be Willie Colombione's like small foam clubs. Again, I don't know the dimensions of that. And then also badminton rackets and things like that. So this is just one point, and we've done almost an hour-long discussion just talking about why sticks aren't counted in, why Luke's vibes, sticks and clubs are two different things.
Yeah.
Why are clubs more impressive than sticks? Why were they tracked by the JAS Con, and why aren't they tracked by the jugglingrecords.com? And why can we define the vibes between the two of them? Like, can I concretely say why Juggling Records correctly doesn't consider a 9-stick flash equivalent to a 9-club flash? And I think I can by drilling down into what gives people vibes. It comes back down to that video that I did about the definition of juggling, and I kind of came up with these like 10, first of all, like the social stuff of it and like what my definition would be, but a lot of it's based on vibes. What are these collection of things which not any individually thing would disqualify that thing from being juggling, but if too many of them turn up, people stop calling the thing juggling and instead call it magic, or instead calling it, skateboarding, or instead calling it twirling or spinning,
I think what this shows is that it is important to ask questions and to get to the bottom of why something is included and why something is excluded, and you shouldn't just do it because... you should have an answer to why you did something. And I always think that this is always what happens when you make a video and I look over it and I ask you, why did you do this? Was that something you did think about? Okay, fine. You thought about it. You made a decision and you can communicate that clearly to me. And even if I agree or not, fine. But I know you thought about it. Right. And it's the same here. I don't care so much what the outcome is or what you tell me, but it is very important that if I ask a question, you don't just say, because don't we all agree on this is why, this is how,
and
this
that's
is,
the thing.
Isn't this just a building? And then,
and vibes based, there is this thing of like, don't we all just agree when a drop occurs? And we can say the reasons for that, but those reasons aren't written down anywhere on the internet, and the vibes-based stuff is indistinguishable. The vibes-based thing, which is where everyone agrees, where we stop counting the record, which is at the point in the pattern where you should have caught something but didn't caught something, and then that thing wasn't caught and touched the ground. Yeah,
but even that is worth writing down.
It's worth writing down, but here's the thing. There's other things which are vibes-based for some people, which for other people is valid.
And we haven't even talked about catches
yet.
No.
Again, this 1 hour-long discussion that we did here about the world progression of our stick, like why aren't sticks included with 9 clubs, which again, I agree they're a different category, but also I'm like, why aren't stick-like things being tracked individually? And again, this is, I think, is quite important. I don't think the stick versus clubs thing is that important, but I think, again, going back to the Committee on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat, because they are now the arbiter, or even not the arbiter, you don't have to get a certificate for them. But if you follow their rules, the certificate will come along. There won't be anything like, no, we measure from this front door and we measure to this high point on the architecture. That's the height of the building, and we're in this territory. Our country's got these 3-letter codes, so we can now claim that we've got the highest building in this country.
Area.
Country. And because there's that clarity, so there's this thing. I brought up some examples here. I've just been collecting some examples, but what I found really interesting was going over to the Juggling wiki here.
Yeah.
And there's lots of things here. 8 is the highest number of clubs that have been performed on stage. And it says Anthony Gatto was the first person to flash 8 clubs in 1998 and the first person to qualify. And then it says these other people have done it. And there's lots of videos of people doing, pretty good 8 club flashes. Mm-hmm. There's also people who are catching clubs by the wrong end. And you'd go, and vibes based, it's included in this list. And I would be like, yeah, vibes based, 8 clubs, they caught them by the wrong end. And then there's other people who don't catch them just by the wrong end, but some of the clubs end up under their arm. And so I think there shouldn't just be rules for what a club is. I think there should definitely be, I think one of the more important things is a procedure thing. Like when you finish the record, don't cut the video Willie Colombione style the moment the ring passes the point where it could have been caught before we can even see it passing your hand and if it touches the floor. That's my only mention of Willie Colombione because he was doing stuff deceptively. And I think other people don't do something deceptively, but they cut the video very quickly after showing them nothing hitting the floor, but is something a drop because it didn't hit the floor yet, or is it a drop because you had full control over it?
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying
I think the distinguishing factor here should be to claim an official world record.
Yes, no, not even. And I think it's not just a this is my point. It's not just to claim an official world record. If you want to claim a personal best, what is the level of clean catchness of how long you held it in your hands before they dropped onto the floor?
Right.
Did you throw them down or did you cut the video? It's fine for you to think that you've done it, but I think it's unkind for people. So one example here is Florian Langer. He's a young juggler. Mm-hmm. He's 18 years old or 19 years old. He posted this one clip of him getting 8 clubs and he's sort of like, I'm really happy that I got this now. It says here, is this going to make noise? He doesn't say. He says, not the cleanest, but I got it before my 18th birthday. So if we look at this video, he catches them all. All right, that's good. If he had cut the video there, he knows he's caught them all. His reaction is, I caught all these clubs, I'm under control.
Yeah, it looks like he catches them.
It looks like, and then he, before getting them all the right way around in his hand, he throws them down onto the ground. Now, I would say I have done things where the clubs haven't hit the ground for that long, but I never had them fully under control. They weren't in my hands. They weren't trapped between different body parts. And within the time that Florian throws the clubs down onto the ground, after legitimately getting an 8 club flash for the first time, in a messy way, but who's me to talk? My first 8 club flash, I was catching them the long way around in my hands as well. But technically, that would be indistinguishable from somebody who had tried 8 clubs. Not all of them had touched the floor before they'd touched the juggler's body, but before they had full control of them, some of them hit the floor. And I actually have a fun video of me doing that. I'm not going to find it now, but I'll show it to you later, where I was getting this, going for this 7 club record. And I caught all the clubs. And then one of them, as I caught the last one of them kind of swung around and I trapped it and I bumped it and then it fell down and hit the floor. And I was laughing about it. I was like, yeah, this is the funny thing that happened. Yeah. This is the funny thing that I was doing this Flash 30 project is, how many times will I be able to go, does this count? And people can go, yeah, I think it counts. And other people go, no, that doesn't count.
I think here, really what it comes down to is ambiguity.
Yes. So
if there's any ambiguity.
No, it's not that there's any ambiguity. I think there should be a procedure that if somebody follows it, there is no ambiguity, is what I'm trying to say. Florian, I think he got 8 clubs. I think that should be perfectly fine. Yeah. But wouldn't it be much better if in the future, instead of holding on to something clearly under control, he's like, have I dropped? His face is still, have I dropped? It's like, no, I haven't dropped. And that's at 7 seconds into the video. And at 10 seconds into the video, the first club hits the floor. So that's a 3-second point between his body language is, I've done it, and him going, I've thrown these on the floor.
Yeah. I think a very clear indication here that he did it is that he changes the trajectory of the clubs after they are all going downwards. He collects them in his arms,
and some of them,
and he's in a squat, and then he moves his whole body upwards,
and they stay attached to his body as they move.
He is controlling them.
There's many different ways. For example, I was talking about this unassisted, and this is one thing that I did post with the juggling, the Flash 30. I said this ring went outside the frame to the side, and I caught it out there, and then I brought it back into the frame. I would say anything off the side or the bottom, if all the props aren't clearly visible on the sides and the bottom, it shouldn't count as a record because we can't see what happened off to the side.
Somebody gives you the
Somebody
ring.
could have just caught it. It could have bounced off a wall. Like lots of things could happen off the side. Above, I think it's easier because you can see the trajectory and you can like just time the object going off the top of the screen. So things going off the top of the screen, I'm not that concerned about. But things going off the bottom of the screen, Willy Colombione style, totally off limits. And I think anything off the sides, like you go out, catch something and come back in. I think everyone vibes based is like, no, you went out the screen and then came back in with all the clubs. Did you drop out there and you had sort of like lots of club setups? So you could just grab one and come back on with it and be like, guys, I caught it all. The other thing is like, so that's vibes-based thing. But I would say there's two different ways of doing this. If everything ends up in your hands or between your hands, like in your hands or down your arms with rings, and nothing can leave your hands, I'd say, great. You caught everything in your hands or trapped between your hands. All the clubs were the right way around, and nothing is like trapped against your body or under your arm or anything. So this is one. I'm not saying one of these is better or anything, but one approach could be the record only counts if you get all the objects back into your hands, held in your hands again or between them, which is generally what happens with balls. But again, I do have some funny things where I catch all the balls and one of them is like trapped against my chest and then I like transfer it into my mouth and I grab it in my mouth and I'm like making a big show of getting the things back into my hands again to show, no, look, all the balls were in my hands when I did this, 14 catches of 10 balls.
Yeah.
That counts because they all got back into my hands. And you see jugglers do this. When I was looking through these 8 clubs, you can definitely see people do something and they'll catch something and one thing will be like trapped under here and they make sure that they get everything back into the hands with 4 clubs in each hand, all the right way around, and they're like, great, and they throw them away. And I'm like, yes, because at one point your hands,
you had them back in
your
places
hands
where you started them.
Where you started, yeah. All the things got back to where they started or where they were thrown from, which is in your hands. That's one thing. The other thing is time-based, that if you do everything, and from the moment that you catch the last object, if you hold everything and it doesn't touch the floor for, again, now I'm just going to say something arbitrary, 10 seconds. So you now have 10 seconds to make sure that nothing touches the floor and nothing touches anything which isn't you and nothing touches anything which, and this is what I said before with, when I did the 9 rings and one of the rings touched my ring holster.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't think it counts because that ring holster, it touched something which wasn't me. And my guide is, if you couldn't do it naked, but we do wear protection, like we do wear clothes, we do wear shoes, we do wear gloves. It's all the ring records are done like high level 13 rings. Everyone uses gloves because you need to be able to not destroy yourself, your feet and your hands, and stuff. So I would say if you can not drop. Actually, this is a really good example here. Let me go back to this. What is it? Ring holster decisions. Let's have a look at Albert Lucas's 12 rings. One of the rings that he catches, it comes down and he doesn't catch it in his hand. He catches it like in between the other rings. You see this ring here?
Yeah, it's stuck on top of the others.
It's stuck on top of the other rings, and I'm like, oh, that's like a scissor catch.
Yeah, it's
like
a catch.
It's a catch because it didn't hit the floor, but it's not in his hands. And I would say, if he, again, by the first one is, can you get everything back into your hands? Like, or either held in your hands or between your hands. I would say he would have to do that by himself. He couldn't have any help to then transfer it. And what happens? People come over and celebrate. He hasn't got everything back in his hands. And then his wife comes in and wants a hug. And then video cuts. And I'm like, oh, he never gets all of those. He never shows that all of those rings are in his hands. Do you see that? Yeah. They're not in his hands, not in his hands. He never tries to get them all in his hands, never wiggles. He pushes them together and kind of rearranges them a bit. Yeah. Are they all in his hands? The video evidence isn't clear, and then he holds them up.
Because for him, he did it, and there was no need for him to do any of it.
There was no procedure. So here's the thing. For 22 years, we didn't know if Albert Lucas had done it. 22 years ago, we could have seen that. And 22 years ago, we could have said, hey, from now on, let's make sure that when you catch rings, they either have to be in your hands or down your arms. They can't be like scissor catch, like trapped between other things. because suddenly I'm like, oh, maybe I could design some rings with catching mechanisms. Maybe I could use magnetic rings that, like, when I throw them, I make sure the magnets are misaligned, but then when they come together, they all snap together. You know, like, there's so many different ways where we could look at this and go, oh, is that allowed? Or could I have someone run in like these two people do and touch me? And I think his wife coming in and touching him, I'm not saying this is wrong or against the rules, but if there's a procedure to say at the end of your juggling pattern, nobody is allowed to touch you or help you or touch any of the props, and you're not allowed to use anything outside of your body, like your hands, your 5 fingers, you could use your mouth, any part of your body you want, but you can't use other tools like a baseball glove with bigger, with extra stuff to make your hands bigger. And he catches that last ring. Let's say he does catch that last ring, and that's it. 109, and then his wife comes over and touches him for the first time at 129. So 109 to 129, like, that's loads of time here, if you know what I mean. Like,
but again, I would argue here that
oh no, it's in slow motion. so it's actually, let's say he managed to get 8 seconds before the time where he had some ambiguous did he catch it or not moment, or does that count as the catch moment. 9 seconds until someone touches him for the first time, which could be interpreted in, like, outside assistance. Again, I don't know what the best answer is, but here's the thing. If you're doing a long jump competition and you do literally the longest jump in the world, and you stand up and you step backwards slightly and put a mark a little bit further back, which happens all the time.
Yeah.
Someone will get up, and because they flipped and they
tumble a
bit and they stand up, they're a bit dizzy, they step back, and that's
the new
that's
distance.
where it counts, where you step back. And everyone just accepts that. So everybody whoever does a long jump knows that when they land, they need to keep moving forwards. Mm-hmm. They need to go in that direction.
I'm sure in the past, there have been people that did this where that wasn't where that wasn't even thought of. That because you did now step back. That's
vibes based. We all did it. We were looking at run walking before, and there was people that they're like, oh yeah, it has to be a live judge. You have to get 3 red cards or 3 red flags, and people have been disqualified like 20 meters before the end of a 30-kilometer race. You race 30 kilometers, 20 meters from the end, your foot goes up above up off the ground.
Both feet are.
Here's the thing.
Visibly.
These moments are legendary in these sports because it's so great to see someone run 100 meters, but the wind was at the back. So they ran the fastest 100 meters of all time, but the wind was behind them. And everyone is like, yeah, but what would it have been like if the wind had come from the front or the wind from the side? Same with, like world record triple jumps and long jumps. And, what would that have measured if he didn't step backwards and it had measured the mark a little bit? That would have, or how if he'd have stepped at this point on the board rather than he jumped from 20 centimeters back from the board, but we don't count those 20 centimeters back from the board. We only count. And these are great moments in sports where somebody does something which is sort of like, if they'd have just followed the procedure, or if they'd have just not broken this one rule, that could have been a world-class performance, but the wind was blowing or they ran downhill or whatever. So I think it's unfair to the juggling world that someone like Florian, again, I think that record is fine, but there are some of these other examples. There's this one guy who does this. He thinks he has the world record for 8 badminton rackets or tennis rackets or whatever. And when you look at it, I'm like, someone should have told him that the video cuts too soon after he's obviously in control of everything. But even then, look at this. What happens here? Can you see this here?
Yeah, the handle touching the floor.
The handle touches the floor. I think that's an immediate disqualification, even though he's kind of caught it by trapping it between his hand and his
Let's not
body.
call it disqualification. I think it's just the ambiguity, or there's just no particular rule that doesn't allow any.
Vibes-based. Yeah. If a prop touches the floor in any way, even if it's in your hand and it touches the floor and you pick it up again, that counts as a drop, because otherwise it's almost impossible to say if so. Like, what could be a drop if it isn't? It touches the floor.
5-second rule.
Yeah. So that means sort of like, does a bounce catch it up? And I've had to do this with in Fight Night, where the club bounces on the floor and it comes back up and someone keeps juggling, and everyone is like, vibes based, no. And then I had to write the rules sort of like, if it's in your hand and your hand is all the way around from it and you collapse into the floor and it touches the floor but your hand is all the way around it and your hand has touched it and is completely in control, and then you do
stealing clubs, the rule, like
all of these things, there has to be rigorous rules. And And when I wrote all the rules for Fight Night Combat, like the rigorous rules for if someone says, would that be allowed? Was that catch valid or not? I picked up 10 years worth of playing combat with people and worked out what the vibes of combat was, and then tried to rigorously outline what they are. And that's fine, because I am the one in charge of Fight Night Combat.
And also, definitely something that came from the community that wanted clarification.
Yes.
Because if like, literally here, if you are not there, somebody has to decide based on something that was written down somewhere where they could point at, I decided based on this.
Yeah. And it's really weird because people think that I should have won the EJC Fight Night in 2016. Because vibes-based, Jochen blatantly cheated. Not blatantly cheated, but Jochen, when he starts losing, he becomes more physical and he pushes the rules. But he pushes the rules knowing that unless I'm making the rules, people will just go with it because it looks dramatic and it looks fun. If there's no rules, people just push the rules. And so people, like numerous people in many different conversations have said, in 2016, you were robbed of the EJC Fight Night because there wasn't, because I was the one in the final up against Jochen, and there was just Martin Willy Wills doing it. I remember that moment really clearly, that Jochen had dropped already. I'd won the point. I'd won match point, tournament point, championship point at the EJC. And Jochen just decided to do a late lunge at me and knock one of my clubs out the way. And I turned to Willie and looked at him. And I looked and I was like, anything? And he was like, he understood at the moment as well. But the previous year, there'd been massive drama when I'd made a call at one point. And there'd been like massive friendship drama about like, I thought something was really not cool, but like that kind of like disrupted my friendship with like friends who I considered close friends, juggler friends. And between me and Jochen, it was like drama because like I'd made a call because he'd always had vibes, and the vibes was always like, hey, we're all here having fun. But when you're Jochen, you can push your luck with people because people don't challenge you because you're the best, and he is the best. Yeah. And it's one of those things that it's like, it can get to the point, and again, I don't want to be too emotional about this kind of stuff, but like the vibes, I think when there's a vibes mismatch, people can get upset. And I don't want to say this guy who obviously didn't get an 8 tennis racket flash. You could, like, the kindest thing that we could possibly say to him is like, please follow these rules. If a club or if your tennis racket touches the floor at any point, that means it doesn't count. And he was like, oh, great. Well, I trained 3 years to get that, thought I got it and stopped training it. And now it's going to take me another 3 years worth of training to get my skills and my fitness back to the point where I can do that. It's kinder to have non-vibes based personal bests, non-vibes based, I got this before my 18th birthday. Because if Florian had like thrown those clubs like 1 second earlier, I'd been like, really? Like you hadn't even got full control over them for like 1 whole second, and then you were like declared victory and threw them down, even though, like, of course, again, I'm not saying it's wrong. His body language is completely clear that he had got that. But why should it be based on, oh, I know this guy, he's honest, he's got no reason to lie about it, and his body language looked good? I faked an 11 ball flash in the past because I was because it was for this top 40 jugglers where I was copying other people. So I was copying the celebrations of other people. So when I would fail at something, I would still practice their celebration. Right. And in the end, I was like, I'm not getting 11 balls. Like, I've destroyed my body trying to get 11 balls. I'll just edit this. But because my body language was 100% clear that I'd got it, nobody questioned it. And why would they? Because my body language is correct. But I could still edit it, you know? Yeah. And again, I don't want to get onto video editing in this way because I think most people are honest. And I think guy with the tennis rackets completely honestly thought he got that. But I think based on most people's vibes, if the thing that you're juggling touches the floor in a record context, it shouldn't count. So it's kindness to not have vibes-based rules.
And as soon as something is written down, I mean, I'm not saying anybody should just write down anything. Yeah. I think it makes everything a bit clearer, not so ambiguous, and it's becoming more objective and less subjective. And again,
I don't want to discount anything that anybody has ever done in terms of records in the past. I want to categorize them.
We shouldn't, because it did count something.
At the time, based on vibes, it counted. And I think everything in the past that was based on vibes, and again, if generally the vibes at the time said it counted, it counted. Again, I'm not talking about Willie Colombo and his, faked records or whatever. I'm just talking about people in good faith thinking they got something. I think that should be included in the Juggling World Record progression or personal bests or whatever, including sticks as clubs. I think they should be counted because at the time, the vibes were that sticks, not even the vibes, the rules were that sticks counted as clubs.
Yeah.
But at one point, someone did 9 clubs and the vibes changed and suddenly those people get dropped out of the record. And I think what we should do is lock in some better vibes. We should lock in these.
So you can then basically say, okay, based on the rule set starting in whatever 2025, and then everything else before that is still valid and counts.
Still valid.
But then you can say after that one point you can.
Again, I don't want it to be my job. I've got a whole document here talking about a new approach, a non-vibes based approach. So if anybody wants to read that, I mean, it's pretty much this discussion what we had, but also talking about ring holsters, assisted, unassisted things, and procedure. And I think there's enough questions that we could ask that, within a few months, me or the community or people who care enough, and it really is only maybe 10, 12 people in the world who care enough about this to actually, because everyone else is fine with the vibes, but there's a few people who really don't want ring holsters to count as real records, and other people who don't think sticks should count as clubs. And I think there's ways to bring these together with assisted records and unassisted record and standard props and non-standard props. And I think clubs are the only thing that we need to worry about with standard and non-standard props, and rings are pretty much the only thing we need to think about with assisted versus unassisted. Although, like I say, this guy with the tennis rackets, he does have this trumpet stand that he puts a thing on.
And maybe rings with the different sizes. Is there a difference between small, big rings?
No, honestly, I think a ring can be just defined by its flatness. Because again, once it gets too thin and too small, it becomes harder to control. I know that because at the moment I'm experimenting with rings that are too light and then rings which are slightly too heavy and rings that are slightly too big and rings that are slightly too small. So I think that'll just shake out by what's the minimum, the minimum ring is 1 molecule thick so it doesn't bump into each other in the air, but it actually needs thickness so you can see it and it doesn't literally slice your hand off when you catch it. Yeah. So if you have gloves, it can be thinner and not hurt your hands as much, but you still need to be able to see it in the air.
And it needs to be stable enough in the air so you can control it.
And again, as someone who's currently experimenting with different flexibilities of rings, so they're not 100% rigid. In some ways, a ring that's too flexible isn't going to work. So when someone makes titanium rings, which are non-flexible and thin, but also visible enough in the air, I think it's all good. So let's wrap it up there after an hour and a half talking about literally one topic, which is which is clubs versus sticks in terms of 9 clubs.
Right.
And the
we
unification.
Talked a little bit about more other things.
So here we go. The direction.
Your proposal.
My proposal is let's move from vibes-based rules for juggling world records and personal bests to getting some stuff on paper so it's not vibes based, because for a long time tallest building in the world was vibes based until technology came along and that was no longer credible anymore because different technologies allowed for different things. Like when it was just sort of like how high can we stack a pile of rocks, it's like, well, yeah, pyramids win and nothing else comes close because it's literally the perfect shape to keep stacking one thing on top. And you're like, yeah, if we just build the base wide enough on some bedrock, we can just keep going up and up and up, and in the end you're like, are we now doing an artificial mountain or are we doing a building? And then you go, right, what's the difference between an artificial hill and a mountain and a building? So that's where we're currently at the point where vibes, we're still at is a pyramid an artificial hill or is it a building kind of thing? In other words, we're still 4,000 years in the past of where we could be, but we're still someone where when someone says, if the emoji consortium says, we want to have an emoji for juggling lots of objects, what should the pattern look like and what is the suitable number of balls to include in this numbers juggling emoji, because there's a walking emoji and a running emoji, so why couldn't there just be a clown juggling emoji and an athletic juggling emoji? What's the committee that they come to? I'm not saying there should be a committee. I'm just saying Juggling World Records, the rules on the jugglingworldrecords.com. Again, no criticism because up until now, everything is vibes-based, but it would be pretty fun if it was more than 7 sentences long because we've just had an hour and a half discussion about one topic which I think could be put down into like 3 paragraphs. Like if we decide what it is, or even the options that could be, it could be 3 to 5 paragraphs talking just about what a club is and why clubs and sticks are different.
Yeah.
I think it could be done. And that means any other time, Guinness World Records, anyone who ever asks any questions and go, what's the world record of club juggling? You could say, well, someone's done 9 sticks in the past, but then the first person to actually use standard clubs was Emil Dahl. And we're like, great, that's the question that we wanted.
Yeah. Perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vibes-based to rules-based.
Yeah. I am always quite a big fan of clarification kind of things. Like if you, for example, if you're applying for a contest, there are going to be rules. You can prepare very precisely for those things. Yeah. And then you can be very, very happy about yourself for getting it according to those rules.
Yeah, like that. Was it Ed Pratt? He was like the first person to unicycle around the world. He's like, no, I can't claim that because I didn't go to the antipodal points. He didn't go to one place exactly 360 degrees around the world and back again, and he didn't keep moving in a single direction with no more than a 2-week break. He's like, no, I can't claim to have unicycled around the world because there are records where people do X all the way around the world. Yeah. Guinness World Records does that, and he didn't fulfill those rules. So he claims to have ridden his unicycle around the world, but he can't claim the record for...
Yeah. And it does in no way
it doesn't diminish what he did.
Anything that he did.
But it's kind if somebody spends a year and a half unicycling around the world...
Thinking they're getting it.
Thinking that they're getting a record, getting back and saying, hey, Guinness World Records, give me the record. And they're like, oh, no, you didn't. You took too long of a break here and you didn't happen to have gone to this one point opposite Madrid in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. It's unkind to let people work on their literal personal best at the height of their abilities and not clarify, oh, no, that club, when you were gathering it at the end, when you were getting them onto your hand, it touched the floor on the way for it to being clearly in your hand. It doesn't count. And other people going, I don't think you get it. Like Peter Bowen going, I don't think a world record with ring holsters counts. Or the people who decide that the sticks don't count anymore, just deleting them from the Wikipedia page for club records. So let's get away from vibes. Let's get to at least a single
less
document.
Ambiguity.
Yeah. Just away from vibes. Anything which is less good than vibes, because again, vibes-based rule determination can lead to personal problems, personal friendship things, especially in competitions. So let's move away from vibes. All right, that's it. That's the end of this podcast. Thanks a lot for listening, everyone. Anything else? No, let's just wrap it up there. We've gone long enough.
That's good.
We'll catch you next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye.